So, welcome everybody to the Circle of Friends. We were just going to have a lovely celebration of the life of Suhas Ram Ginde, who dropped his body, who merged with Baba on December 7th last year, 2020. So, to give an overview of what we're going to do today, his brother, Suhas' brother Vijay, put together a slideshow and a presentation about his brother and had his daughter read it because he himself felt that he had some health issues that prevented him from appearing live on video or even recording his voice. So we will hear Suhas' niece reading Vijay's.
Hello and good morning to everyone. I am Preeti, Suhas Ginde's niece. I am speaking on behalf of my father, Vijay Ginde, who apologizes for not joining in via Zoom today. He would like to thank you for being invited to share a few words in celebration of Suhas's life. In Vijay's words, Suhas was my elder brother and we went to school together and also had the good fortune of being in the US for our higher education. Suhas was very bright and intelligent and did well in school and university. He had a love for music, and our childhood friends remember him for his dashing good looks and his beautiful singing voice. He recorded many of our favorite artists on cassette tapes in the days when we listened to tapes on our music system. This exchange of music continued, with Suhas sharing the very best of his jazz music collection on CD with my son and with us in India. Suhas lived life on his own terms and marched to the tunes of his own drum. Suhas had a photographic memory and was a good narrator of stories. This helped him remember every anecdote, story, and event in the life of our father, Dr. Ginde, and his association with Meher Baba. There is an incident I recall very vividly. My father, Dr. Ginde, my mother, Suhas, and I visited Meher Baba's ashram in Pune to take his blessings. We were in our teens then. I distinctly remember Meher Baba blessing Suhas and putting his hand on his head. This was very significant for Suhas as it led him to Los Angeles, the Meher Baba Center, and to the support and love he received from the Baba followers. Thank you for being there for my brother and helping him when he needed help. We are grateful for your constant support and friendship. My father, Dr. Ginde, was a renowned neurosurgeon. He was called to treat Meher Baba for trigeminal neuralgia. He first visited Baba as a doctor and then grew to love him very deeply. This was how our family was led to Meher Baba. We still feel Meher Baba is constantly guiding us in the various stages of our lives. We feel that Suhas has gone to a better place. We will always have fond memories of Suhas. Thank you, Jai Baba. Hello.
So Fred, do you want to say a few words and then I'll show the short film?
Yes, Suhas was a good friend and my partner on a Meher Baba television program on cable access for about 12 years. And we shared some good readings from Lord Meher. And one reading from Lord Meher really hit home with Suhas. And volume 20, page 6507, the last paragraph, Baba's talking to Dr. Ginde. Baba then mentioned the increasing awareness of his work and love for him throughout the world, especially among college students in America. And he asked about Suhas, Ginde's son, who was a student at the University of California in Los Angeles, UCLA, and whom Baba had seen before he left for America the past year. So I kidded my good friend Suhas. I said, "You're immortalized in Lord Meher. Baba asked about you. It's in print." And Suhas was very, very modest about it. He said, "Oh, well, that's great." But he talked about his father and amazing work that He was the foremost neurosurgeon probably in India in the time, and told some great stories. And so this video of Suhas talking about meeting Baba is very, very wonderful. It's coming up now, so let's go to that.
Now, most of my life, I read books of the Buddha, I read books of Ram, and I heard stories about Krishna, Ram. These were the thoughts in the back of my mind. But I had never thought about going to look for a spiritual master such as exists in India, the hundreds of them. I did have the thought of someday leaving my home and going to either like live in a forest or go to the Himalayas or somewhere, like be a renunciate or a sadhu. So I didn't have, these were my inner thoughts. I mean, but they were within me. These were my sanskaras. In 1965, about April, I think, my father sat at the dining room table at night, about 7 o'clock, in April, I think, in 65. Because Baba was in seclusion in the 1960s due to the accident. Very few people saw him. My father was one of them. And then suddenly my father says at the dining room table, Baba has expressed a desire to meet the rest of the family. He's giving a darshan in Pune in May, and so we are all going there for the weekend. So reluctantly, I agreed to go to Pune to meet Baba, and then I told my mom, I'm going to meet with Baba and pay my respects, and then return right back to Bombay, because I don't want to, they were going to stay there for the weekend. A couple of my dad's patients were coming with us, so I was getting a ride back with one of their cars because they were going back after one day. So in Pune, we're at the Pune Center. I'm in a hall just like this, sitting. You've seen it all in that film, the ancient one. There's a dais. We're sitting in the hall like the first row, like where Benaz is sitting, and we're waiting for Baba to arrive because he hasn't come here. He was in Meher Azad. We're in Pune. No, he was in Guru Prasad. It was in the summer. It was in May 1st, 1965. I remember that incident like it was yesterday. Well, I look out the window because, moved around a bit. I saw people outside in the parking lot now just praying. It was a little frightening. I was about 20 years old, 1965, and it was quite a sight, to see people have that kind of devotion. And then suddenly we heard a car honking, and then everybody got up in the hall. Baba's arrived. When he came through the front door, to the door of the hall, and then he recognized my dad in the waiting line. And I saw this with my own eyes. Baba, there was a look of recognition in Baba's face. The first time I laid my eyes on Baba, and he took both his hands like this, and he put them on my father's face like this. Do you understand? Do you get the significance of that? He put his hands on my father's face like someone holds a child. You've probably seen pictures of Baba doing that to some of his lovers. That means there was a sense of affection. And then later on, he was brought on the dais, and then we all had to file by him, to greet him or to meet with him. And he was sitting on a platform. You've seen it in the ancient one. And as much as I was reluctant to meet him, When I approached him and came to it in front of him, don't ask me why, I instinctively put my forehead on his bare feet. He was like on a platform at the chest level, and I bowed down to him, and I put my forehead on his feet, which in India is the highest form of appreciation to anybody, because to elder people and all that, we bow down to them like a namaste. And I did that. I felt someone's hand like on my head, like pressing me down. So I don't know. But that's like a moment in time. And then later on, forgot about it and we moved on. And the program was where people read some things and so on. And so we moved on. And later in the afternoon, when the Pune Center program was over, then we went and I got to see Baba at Guru Prasad, which doesn't exist anymore. Guru Prasad, we were like in a living room, like the living room up front. And my family was sitting on a couch, like in a bag, and Baba was sitting in an armchair on one side of the room, and Erach was behind him. I gotta tell you something. Baba's skin was so soft. It's like when I put my forehead on his feet, it's like it sinks into like a cushion. And his skin was so white, so fair, like a baby's. He was probably, in 65, was about 71 years old. And I tell you, I've never seen a human being of his magnitude. So I had to bow to that person. I've never bowed to anybody since then, after that. So later on at Guru Prasad, because I told my dad and my mom that I would go back after I met him, so we had an audience with Baba in private. And then, you know, the thing is, you do not miss Baba's talking and not talking. Because Erach was sitting behind Baba, you know, Baba would make gestures and you could hear Erach's voice, but it would appear like it was Baba talking. So you don't know if Baba's speaking or not. It's almost like how you people are silent, but you can talk, you don't miss it. And then of course, there were like, you know, he talks about everyday things like, how are you, this, that, did you sleep well last night, this, that. He asks questions of the family members and so on. Now I learned from Gadekar, who was here a couple of years, 3 or 4 years ago. He was one of the people who grew up around Baba, like Sheila Kalchuri. And he said Baba usually sees people with their families, you know, together, because there's a connection with the sanskaras from previous lives. So this went on for a couple of hours. We were just in his presence. And then it was time for me, the friends, patients of my father, they wanted to go. And I was trying to get Baba's attention. You know, like, I want to go now. You say goodbye to somebody before you leave, you just don't walk out of the door. It's disrespectful. But his attention was to Erach to the side. He was ignoring things. And suddenly I said to Baba, I said, I'm going to go now. I got to go now, go back to Bombay. So Baba turns around and looks at me full square in the face, and he gives me this, just like that painting. That was the last time I saw him.
Jai Baba. Fred, do you want to say anything?
Yes, Suhas has complete stories also about his connection and how the little background on that first meeting with Baba. Suhas was a young man, 19 going on 20, and that was April of 1965. And Dr. Ginde says to his son, we're going to meet Mayor Baba in Pune. You like to go? We want you to go with us. And he was sort of not interested in going. And according to Peter Ravazza, who had this backstory, he said, Dr. Ginde said, you know, your trip to the US and being financed by our family is basically maybe withheld if you don't go with us to meet Baba. So Suhas said, oh, well, okay, then I'll go. So Suhas did go, and of course what happened was remarkable. And Suhas was delivered, by the way. His father was a neurosurgeon, but he also apparently had gynecological type of expertise, and he delivered all his children. So Suhas was delivered by his own father as a baby. And as you can see, Suhas was a very handsome man, and especially when his hair was long. And when he came to LA after graduating from UCLA, he got a job in the recording business with several big labels like A&M Records and so forth. And he was invited to quite a few of these celebrity type get-togethers. And he remembered one time when he was invited to a party in Malibu, an upscale house, and the Rolling Stones were there. And so he met all these Rolling Stones and people that would come up to him. And with his good looks, he was very, very much a magnet for people to come up to talk to him. But he always would say, no, I never got involved with that nightlife stuff. I enjoyed it, but he loved jazz music. He'd go to the jazz bakery. Billy Goodrum, a good friend of mine, and also Suhas. Of course, Billy's a great musician and singer. And he would go with Suhas and listen to jazz. And Suhas also had a thing, when he connected with somebody, he would want to call you. And he'd call you, and a 10-minute talk would end up in an hour and 10 minutes. And you would talk about everything, because Suhas, once he got on a roll, he was like Bao Kulturi. Talk. And we also, after our Mir Baba TV production programs, which would be about an hour and a half, 2 hours, we would usually do it around the lunchtime, come out on 1, 2 o'clock. And he'd always ask me, now we've got to find a good Indian buffet for lunch where we can go and enjoy the food and discuss what we just did. And some of these places of buffet, of course, you eat all you can eat while you're there. But Suhas would have the gall to ask the proprietor, may I take a little bit home with me from this buffet? And a couple of times he got turned down, but he would also basically get to do that. So we shared some great times together, and the programs, we must have did about at least 50, 60, 70 programs on the Meher Baba Television Hour, starting in the late 90s. I first met him in the mid 90s at our old Baba Center on Little Santa Monica Boulevard in West Los Angeles. And I was impressed with his articulate conversation. And we used to read from Lord Meher. We have like a Monday night Lord Meher group at the Baba Center. And I would be there. Maybe it would be 4 or 5 people would come, and we'd sit in a circle and read from the book. And God bless her, Kathy Williams and her husband, Gus, would be there. And they would read. And of course, Kathy, being from Iran and having a little bit of difficulty reading English, would always have her husband read for him. And Gus would always say, well, I'm not really much of a Baba lover. Through Kathy, I am. So Gus would pick up the book, and we were like in the first chapter talking about various of Baba's masters. One was Upasni Maharaj. And so when Gus would start reading the book, Suhas would be listening. Suhas would be next in line. Gus would start reading and say, Upasani Maharaj, Upasani. And so Suhas would interject, excuse me, Gus, it's Upasni Maharaj. that we would get a chuckle about that. Upasani. And so we developed a friendship. And when I knew Suhas' expertise on metaphysical subjects and Baba himself, I said, you know, man, you'd be a great partner for this TV show that I'm doing, because I would do it alone. And so we hooked on together, and the rest is history. We really enjoyed working together. So over to the host.
Well, I didn't know Suhas as well as Fred did, and he had all those wonderful experiences with him with the wonderful TV show that Fred ran for so many years, and that reached out to so many people with Baba's message. And the fact that Suhas was a partner in that, it was very significant. It meant a lot to a lot of people. Suhas, my memory of Suhas is, Fred said, he would call you up and talk for as long as you basically would stay on the phone. And he was a real connector. He brought people, kept them connected to the center, to the LA Center, and also to Mayor Baba, and had a tremendous depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge from all of Baba's books and his teachings. And he would remind you of that at great length every chance he got. Right, Fred? He would love to lecture, let's say. You know, just casually when you met him at the LA Center, for example. Oh, hi, Suhas. Oh, hi, Sam. Let me tell you all about God Speaks and the 10 states of God. Let's go through them one at a time. And, you know, I mean, that's the kind of guy Suhas was. He was so filled with it and had such a passionate desire to communicate it that, you know, you couldn't help but be caught up with his enthusiasm. And anyway, a very special guy, and, you know, good memories. Jai Baba.
Thank you, Sam. I thought he was adorable. I never met him, but just watching that little film of him, he was just adorable. I would love to have met him. David, Israel, would you like to share something?
Let's see. I moved back to Los Angeles in 2009. I actually had grown up in LA, and in the 1970s, I used to work in the Meher Baba bookstore in Pasadena when I was in high school, and I'm giving my own biography a little bit here, just because, just to fit in how, you know, where I was when I got to know Suhas. And I don't think I knew Suhas back in those days. So it was after I returned to LA after being elsewhere in America, and then I lived in India for a couple of years, and then I came back to, I had tried to work in India. I'd gotten a job offer, but India wouldn't give me a work visa. And so I repatriated, and because I'd totally run out of money, I began to live with my parents back in Los Angeles, where I hadn't lived since I was a teenager. And so that's how I sort of ended up in LA. And I began doing things with the Baba Center. You know, I mean, it was kind of a reconnection because I had that connection from my teenage years. So somewhere along the line, I began to know Suhas, you know, probably going to meetings. I think he would come from time to time to the regular weekly Sunday meetings. And I think I would give him rides maybe to the meetings or from the meetings. And after a couple of years, I began taking him shopping, grocery shopping. Suhas lived in a condo it was more or less West LA, and near Culver City. And he was really kind of a recluse. He was kind of a hermit in this condo. He didn't get out very much. is my impression. And he had some physical disability. He had difficulty walking. He walked with a walker for, the last half a dozen years of his life, I think, if I have that right. And he didn't drive a car, and so he needed someone to take him shopping. So I began doing that, and I might have been on and off, but I might have done that for a couple of years, something like that. And so, uh, if you meet with someone regularly and you do something together, you get to know them. And so Suhas just became a nice friend through that. And we talked about different things, but it wasn't a deeply intellectual friendship. But he was someone who had such a good spirit, such a warm nature that I feel close to him because of that experience. And then through some difficulties and things in my own life, I really wasn't able to keep having a car anymore since maybe a couple of years ago. And after I wasn't able to drive, well, by then Suhas had gone from his condo to stay in a nursing home in Santa Monica. And in fact, I had another friend, an artist, who was also staying in another nursing home in Santa Monica. And these two nursing homes were located across the street from each other. So I would go visit my artist friend at one and then go across the street and say hello to Suhas at the other nursing home. And but then when I no longer had a car, I kind of stopped visiting. And my friend at the one nursing home passed away in 2018. And then, when the coronavirus hit this year, the beginning of last year, early last year, and people weren't really allowed to visit people in nursing homes, I just kind of put the whole matter on hold, figuring eventually I would, go see how Suhas was doing or something. But basically, I didn't even realize that he'd moved from that nursing home to another one, I think 3 blocks away. And Fred from time to time would send emails saying that he'd had a conversation with Suhas, or there was one, I think several months ago, where he said he had this Suhas had called him and had this intense conversation with him. And that was at a time when Suhas officially arranged to have all of his stuff moved out of his condo. He'd been maintaining and paying for this condo, while he was in the nursing home for a year or a couple of years. And so he eventually, I guess, realized or decided that he didn't need to do that. And I think that kind of signaled the end of the story for Suhas in this incarnation. In retrospect, I wish I had been alerted by that more and had made the effort to try and see if I could speak with him on the phone or something. But so there's that side of it. But I'm just now, when I think of Suhas, I'm just filled with this kind of bubbling happiness that he had in connection with Meher Baba. And I think that's the keynote of Suhas for me. So that's what I have to say. Jai Baba.
Wow, that was really wonderful. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. We're still on the morning side in West Coast, and but good to be here with all of us. I knew Suhas from the day I joined Baba in 1995. And of course, when I joined Baba, I joined a Los Angeles Baba Center and started being active with the board and other committees and so forth by Baba's design. And so Suhas was a very interesting, he had a very interesting personality. I didn't know him very closely because I only see him at the Baba Center, but he was an Eastern man who has adopted to the West, yet kept all his Eastern feature. He was very conscientious. To me, he had a scholarly knowledge of, all together, and also Meher Baba. So when Fred had a Lord Meher meeting and so forth, he was always there, contributing. And he had a nice feature where people easily could connect with him. My husband, Sharior, who does not wouldn't come to the center as much or wasn't very involved. He liked Suhas very much, by the way. And when he heard he has gone, he was at the awe. But we really remember him very fondly, and and one thing was very admirable about Suhas toward the end. He had some physical difficulties. I don't exactly know what it was because I did not ask him. There was that layer of bashfulness and reserved nature with him that I wouldn't just come, hey, what's going on? How's your health? No, none of those conversations. But I could see toward the end, he was walking with a walker, had a difficulty, walking and so forth. Yet he would attend all the Ward Park seminar. When Ward Parks had seminar on discourses, infinite intelligence, God speaks, and so forth, Suhas was there and contributed. So he followed his passion and his scholarly knowledge, and he contributed quite a bit. He would just come to the Baba meeting, and despite of perhaps difficulty that would sit on those chairs, he would just sit there silently listening. So I really admired his courage and his faith in Baba. We really like Suhas very much. So I'm sure he's having a good time in another world with Baba and all the surrounding. So God bless you, Suhas. Baba bless you. Jai Baba. I'm done.
Okay, Jai Baba, thank you. So Rosalie has her hand up.
Jai Baba, I was so happy to have this remembrance of Suhas. I do remember him briefly before I left, before Baba moved me to Myrtle Beach. I remember how intense he was very intense. I don't think I ever said a word to him or he to me, but I remember that, and I remember liking him, and I remember he was incredibly good looking, very handsome. And so, but what I wanted to say is it reminds me of how precious every soul is that belongs to Baba. Of course, the whole creation does, but we're very gifted to know of Baba and to share this with the group. And Fred, I have to say, I'm very thankful that you allowed him to have this outlet with you. I mean, your heart just went out to Suhas, and it must have been such a tremendous gift to his heart that he could express. Yeah, Jai Baba. Thank you.
Jai Baba, Rosalie. Well, if there's someone else who'd like to share, just unmute yourself. We'll accommodate you somehow. Fred, do you have another story for us?
Gigi wants to say something.
Oh, cool.
Go ahead. No, right here.
Hey, Gigi.
Put down a little bit.
Okay. The only thing I want to say is that Suhas really loved basketball. think he and Fred had that connection too.
About the Lakers.
And with UCLA, which is a big basketball school. And so I remember him, and Fred doesn't remember this, but I remember him telling me that he gave God Speaks to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And so, and the other thing was when David was talking about him being a reclusive, he was working at home before this pandemic, even then for years. And he was selling toner and what have you. And so office supplies. And he was an independent contractor doing that. So that's how he sustained himself. But like whenever Suhas called, you would know that it was going to be a long conversation, but very interesting. He was a very interesting person, and I was happy for Fred that he found a compadre to do his programs, because when you do a program for as long as Fred did, it was hard to think of other things to do, and Suhas always had ideas. And so I was happy about that. And socially, we would always go to, Lois has a little Christmas brunch. I think, Rosalie, you remember those Christmas brunches, and Suhas would come to those. And he was always an interesting conversationalist and participant in that. So we had a lot of good memories with him. And but if you were in a hurry, of course, when you got one of those phone calls, you just went, uh-oh, it's Suhas. You knew you were going to be on the phone for a while. Anyway, that's it for me. And my dog, Getty.
Thank you. I bet Betty remembers Suhas as well. Oh, that was wonderful. Thank you. I really wish I could have met him. That sounds like somebody I really would have enjoyed. David, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I'll give it a little thought and let you know. But Suhas, his feeling of connection, I guess I will add something. His feeling of connection with Meher Baba, I think, was very strongly seared into him in that meeting. I think it was just one meeting that he had with Meher Baba at Guru Prasad. But as I, kind of imagine it or understand it vicariously, it seems to me that it was like a moment that stopped in time, that Meher Baba stepped through all of the layers of Suhas and connected with him or touched him, in a way so strongly that the rest, anything in his life that might happen, there, it was all reorganized. I felt by that touch of Meher Baba. And Suhas was he was kind of a rascal, I think, in some ways, from some perspectives. He was sent to study engineering, I think, at UCLA, and which is, after all, a reasonably respectable profession, I think, from a conservative Indian point of view. His father, of course, was a very well-regarded physician. But Suhas was really interested in music, in jazz and rock and roll. And he became an audio engineer. He worked for a big record company for decades, recording, a lot of famous musicians, I think especially jazz musicians. And I think he wasn't completely above, I think, the kind of the social rock and roll life. I think he was part of that in his younger years. But he was just totally his own person. He followed that interest, and the work that was mentioned where he did he basically worked through his telephone selling office supplies, as was mentioned. That was all kind of a retirement work for him after he had eventually retired from working. But I can't remember if it might have been Capitol Records, I think, that he worked for some decades, and for his professional life. So that is worth mentioning too. It's interesting in this pandemic that we connect through Zoom in this kind of way. And I think this may be about the third Zoom memorial that I've attended and participated in. It strikes me that it's almost like a technological analogy of our inner connection. And so I don't know, somehow it feels really appropriate to thinking of Suhas. It's easy to picture him as one more block in the screen here. And I think he's with us, even though his video is turned off and his audio is muted right now. So, Jai Baba.
That was beautiful, David. Thank you. I really like that image.
Yeah, I didn't say before, but one of the things that really impressed me about Suhas was as he became physically somewhat disabled, I would usually see him seated or in a wheelchair in those last days. Clearly, he was in a lot of pain, and his condition was deteriorating over time. And he never complained, at least in my presence. And I was very impressed by that. He was always cheerful, and he was always Suhas. He was who he was, and his personality was still full force, even as his strength was clearly diminishing over time. And I was just so impressed with that, because it really felt to me that he had truly assimilated Baba's message about being cheerful. And, as Baba said, because it helps others to look cheerful. But he had to be suffering at the same time. And so that's one of the memories I'll treasure about him, is that he really lived that. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Sam. That is so important to remember when people are suffering and can still be themselves. That's living Baba's life. It's living Baba's life, I think.
Welcome, brothers and sisters. This is the Meher Baba program. I'm Fred Stankus, along with my co-host, Suhas Ram Ginde. Welcome, Suhas.
Thank you.
And today's program is going to be concentrating about your dad, Suhas Ram Ginde's father, Dr. Ram Ginde, one of the foremost neurosurgeons in all of India in the 50s and 60s and the 70s. And Suhas, you can tell us how your dad was drawn to Meher Baba, and of course you, through your dad, met Meher Baba. But first of all, do you want to tell me a little bit about your dad as far as his background before he became a doctor?
Well, he was born in a small town called Bailhongal. It's near Belgaum, about maybe 300 miles south of Bombay. And And he studied at Deccan College in Pune, where Baba also studied for 1 year before he got realized. My dad studied there for 1 year, then he came to Bombay and he studied medicine at a medical school. I think it was Grant Medical College in a place called Parel. It's near Dadar. You may have heard of Dadar, where Manzil-e-Meen was.
In Bombay.
In Bombay.
Now called Mumbai.
Mumbai now, and he later went to England to study for the FRCS Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons, but then war broke out in 1940. So being an Indian citizen, they were told to return to their homeland. World War II broke out. So he had to come back, and he practiced gynecology when he was initially a doctor, and he delivered me and my two brothers as part of his practice. We were born in the 40s.
Oh, so you were delivered by your dad?
And sired by him. So
and sired.
That's unusual. Right?
That's wonderful.
And my brothers too. So we had a dispensary on the first floor in a 3-story building. We lived on the top floor. And that's where he met most of his patients. Now, sometime in 1950, he wanted to further his studies, so he came to Montreal, Canada, to study brain surgery. And at that time, the founder of modern brain surgery, Dr. Wilder Penfield, Penfield, Wilder, Wilder, was teaching at that school, and my dad studied under him, the founder of modern brain surgery. Prior to that, it was called lobotomy, working with the brain. And they found cases where even the American Indians, the people in this country, used to practice a rudimentary type of brain surgery, where they scalped people. I'm not talking about during war, but during, they found skulls where certain parts were removed to do some kind of early forms of brain surgery. So, now we're talking about modern brain surgery. Now they do it with lasers and everything else. So he studied there for about 2 or 3 years, and he studied under the founder. He was one of the very good students. And he came back to India sometime in about 50, 52, and settled in Bombay and started his practice there. And so later on, he moved up. We lived in Dadar the first 10 years of my life, about 54, 55. And then we moved towards where we are now, towards Breach Candy. And then he had an office for private consultation at the Breach Candy Hospital, very exclusive area. And then he also went to 3 other hospitals and treated patients there.
And you were telling me your father was a type A. In other words, he was a workaholic.
He was dedicated to his work.
And also, he would see hundreds of patients during the day, and if some of them could not pay, they still were treated. And he would basically earn his living by seeing those that could pay.
The private practice.
The private practice, but he had this clinic that I guess he would open early in the morning.
He had an office.
And people would just come filing in, and being we could say following the Hippocratic Oath to the T, took care of all beings that needed.
My father was a conscientious doctor. He treated everybody equally. He taught me to treat everybody equally. There was no distinction. People who came there for help got treated. Some recovered. If they didn't, he would then find them other means for them to get better.
And if they couldn't pay, he didn't charge them.
Most of the hospitals in India, we have socialized medicine, so it's government control. The private practice is where he can charge an individual who could pay. Someone who was an industrialist, someone in the government, a minister.
But your father chose to work in the government-type treated hospital or clinic.
Because he had to practice.
In other words, he could have not had to practice. Could he have just done private treatment?
No. Then he would have had few patients.
Oh, I see.
That could pay him, but he treated a lot of the people who were poor, who were indigent, who were needy.
So the thing is, though,
It's very expensive to have a brain operation, but people get into accidents, they have problems with their brain. So not just the brain, there's a spinal column too. It's all connected to the brain.
So his practice then in Bombay was neurosurgery. Yes. So he would meet the patient, go over their case history, or possibly be called for emergency surgeries too. And so in turn, he would work that way. But so what leads up now to Meher Baba, the avatar,
Yes.
contacting
The connection there is that sometime in 1959, 1960, Baba at that time developed a form of herpes. And this, he was getting a lot of pain, and usually it's the fifth nerve that gets in your brain that gets kind of, affected. And so it gets like what causes you excruciating pain. So that was maybe I don't know, Baba was not eating at the time, so he had a couple of doctors with him, Dr. Gohar Irani and Dr. William Donkin, who were part of his inner circle, and they wanted him to see a specialist. So they
look in the yellow pages.
No yellow pages.
Oh, well, I would say.
They knew Nariman Dada Chanji was sort of like an administrator for Mir Azad and so on, the properties there. And he lived in Bombay, not far from where we were, and also where the hospital was, the Breach Candy Hospital. And so he was told to locate my dad and bring him.
In other words, your dad had a reputation as being a good...
Well, he was one of the leading brain surgeons in the country at that time, like 50s.
And so he was contacted.
He was contacted with Nariman, who followed him around just to get a meeting with him.
And so it took a while for this Meher Baba, you could say, I'm sorry.
My dad was busy.
Yeah.
With his work.
So he didn't understand, what is this man following around? And secondly...
He was going to see his patients, and Nariman would follow him.
He was following him.
Talk to him.
And the thing is, it's not a short distance from Merazad or Ahmed
About
Nagar.
240 miles.
200...
About 240.
240 miles. This gentleman's coming out of a small little town, coming to Bombay.
Yeah, but Nariman lived in Bombay, so
yes. So what I'm saying, he's a follower of Meher Baba living in Bombay, but he wanted your father to go to this town, Merazat, 240 miles away.
So he told him about this situation. He said, there's a patient there, my elder brother. He's not eating, he's got pain in his head, he wants to see someone like you. So then my dad wanted Baba to be moved to a hospital in town. I mean, you can't just go see him in like a house call. And one thing led to another. They came and they arranged for a driver to take him over there. So he made plans, took his medicine bag and they went. So initially, my dad went to see Baba as a doctor to see a patient, not as there was nothing spiritual.
Exactly.
He wasn't looking for salvation, for a spiritual...
He didn't even know who Meher Baba was.
He did not. I mean, he may have heard, because there have been articles in the Indian newspapers about Baba visiting Bombay and so on. He may have read, I don't know. So he went with a group of people that had come from Mirza to take him there. And he thought they were going to take him just to Pune. Pune is about 120 miles from where you've been there.
Nice
it's in the
college
hills.
town.
That's where Baba was born.
Very colorful, beautiful town.
And so he thought they were taking him to Pune, and that's where Baba was, according to what they told him. But later on, the car kept going past Pune, and my father was saying to them, where are you guys taking me?
You're kidnapping me.
They went, they had to kidnap my dad. They took him all the way to Ahmednagar and past that 9 miles to Mir Azad.
Small
town.
Rural, it's just a
Ahmednagar is a small town.
Yeah, Ahmednagar, but also Merazad is just a compound.
Yeah, it was another 100 miles from Pune, a little northeast of Pune, maybe, and then another 9 miles more from that town to where Baba was. And he was in a house where you probably may have been.
The residence.
He stayed there. And when he got there, I mean, you know the story, right? About
Well, tell it. I'm sure our viewers haven't heard
We
it.
did this about 5 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, no, but let's refresh it till we get
Okay,
to
so
the
this is like
point. And then we'll get that photo ready in the studio too of Baba and your father.
Yeah.
When the moment comes, we'll put that up.
So this is an unusual story, and you know, this makes you think a little bit. So he gets to see Mir Baba. He's sitting in this room. He's sitting on the bed with his feet dangling, you know, from the edge of the bed, and he goes and sees him. And I think this was his first impression of meeting with Mir Baba. And then my dad was a little bit, you know, mollified, or how should you say it, calmed down a little bit. And in another room, there were a couple of medical books and all on different types of brain problems that the doctors that lived there were going through. And they told my dad what the symptoms or what the signs were, what was wrong with Baba, what was the cause of the pain, and so on. So my dad looked at Baba and he said, well, the way I see it, you have some kind of a neuralgia, and what I can do is I can prescribe you some pain pills, you know, pills that will take the pain away whenever it comes. Or the other aspect is to give you a shot with a huge needle and then numb the nerve.
And that needle was about 6 inches long.
Well, if you don't.
I mean, it was a monstrous needle
Yeah.
that would be injected where?
Into the forehead.
Into the forehead.
Yeah.
And it had to be a precise
to get to that
pinpointed
nerve.
injection.
Otherwise, said if the procedure doesn't go properly, you could be paralyzed on the right side of the face. And he said, if it was my own father, I wouldn't have prescribed this thing for him. I would just prescribe him the pain.
So he tells Baba this, the risks of it. What does Baba say?
The downside, you know, meaning if it doesn't go right, you could be paralyzed because the nerve is inside the brain,
right,
inside the head. So, and he says, normally we would do this under anesthetics, you know, in a hospital where you would numb somebody, put him to sleep. So Baba says to my dad, well, what are you waiting for? Give me the shot. Now that's something that makes you think, right? So my dad goes to have some lunch there while they're getting in the room sanitized and ready. So he has some breakfast, I think, and he comes back an hour later, and they got the room ready, you know, cleaned up and so on, and he gives Baba the shot. And Erach, who was Baba's interpreter, said, you know, he said you could hear the needle go through the forehead, made a big popping sound.
It went through the forehead.
Oh, yeah, and there was no anesthetic. You know, Baba was wide awake. He did ask Baba, he said, but you don't talk. You know, Baba was silent since July 10th, 1925, and he says, well, you got to give me some indication whether you have pain or not, because that's the way patients communicate to the doctor. The doctor asks them, does it hurt? Is it okay? You know, when they give you a shot, they don't know till you tell them, ouch. So Baba says, I will just raise my finger if there's a pain. So the shot went in. My dad says in a narrative that I have, he says, you know, by that time I'd forgotten everything. I'd forgotten that I was in Mirzad, I'd forgotten about Bombay, I'd even forgotten where I was, including myself. He said, I just became an instrument in Baba's hands.
And the shot was...
The shot goes in.
Perfect.
And he says it takes doctors, expert doctors, half an hour to just fiddle around till they hit the nerve. He said the needle, he says, all I knew is that the needle went in, it hit the right spot where the nerve was, and then he had to put a smaller needle inside the larger needle in which there was a drop of alcohol. He has to push the plunger to the drop hits the nerve and numbs it. And then Baba's all smiles. So that's something.
And there a picture of your dad with Baba. I think we had some pictures stored before the program. Oh, there it is. There's your father on the right.
Baba on the
and
right.
There's Baba.
Erach, the interpreter. That was taken at Guru Prasad, the place in Pune.
Yeah, this is a few years later.
Yeah, much later. This was mid-60s.
But there's your dad. and so now we go to the Lord Mihir account, which is the biography of Avatar Meher Baba in 1965. There is a account here where if you want to, well, you can paraphrase
let me just finish the story a little bit quickly. Soon as the shot was over, Baba called for food.
And he wasn't eating beforehand.
No, for about 2 weeks he had stopped eating. I mean, he used to fast and so on.
Yeah, but he couldn't eat.
Eating.
Yeah, when you're ill, you don't feel like eating.
Yeah, and that's where the disciples of the Mandali were worried, and that's why they brought my dad in. And even when he told Baba, you may have to go to the hospital, he said, well, you're the expert, you should be able to do it right here.
Yeah, so anyway, Baba started eating, then your father went back to Bombay.
Yeah, he called for food at the time, and they brought a whole plate of like a palau or something. And this is the thing that also touches me, you know. Baba took the first morsel of food and he put it in my father's mouth, like prasad. Now remember this, my father had no knowledge of spirituality, as for he wasn't going there for that. He went in as just a doctor to go treat a patient. That's what he was called upon. Right. So all these things are going on, which later.
And he's a very educated man. He's not
highly educated.
He's he's basically a person that is not going to just fall for anything, you know.
Yeah, true.
And so.
And so later on, when he went away to the office where Adi was, and they got a call from the house that the pain came back. After the numbness of the alcohol went away, so the pain came, and my dad said, that makes me very happy, which means there would be no after effects, like paralysis or that. My dad said, I'm very happy that the pain came back, because after a while, the narrator says in a narrative that I heard from him, says, after a while, this herpes condition just went away, and it was probably a means for Baba to bring my father closer to him.
So then your father is...
And then he forgot all about this for a couple of years, and then later on my dad became restless and that he wanted to go see Baba on his own.
Oh, I didn't hear that part of your story ever. So in other words, after this incident, a couple of years passes by.
A couple of years go by, my dad goes back to Bombay and practices his, goes about his business.
So Baba was just another patient that he saw?
At that time.
Right. So 2 years go by, then what happens?
2 years go by, my dad had a little... like a heart problem, so we kept him in the house, and a telegram came in from Meher Baba. Adi probably sent it. His secretary, Adi Irani, said, don't worry, my nazar, meaning my inner sight, is on you. A telegram came to my dad when he had a little, heart problem, and we kept him in the house to recuperate.
No, but how did Baba find out about this?
Well,
no, wait a minute. In other words, this telegram comes to your dad about
I'm sure they kept in touch.
Somebody maybe was notifying Baba that Dr. Ginde had a heart problem.
Well, in my dad's narrative on one of the tapes that I got, he says that maybe about 6 months later, people started coming from Meher Azad, Mandali people. They were given some kind of a letter to go see my dad by someone in Meher Azad, and the first person who shows up is like Kaka Baria. Came for some kind of pain he had, and my dad treated him, then Donkin showed up. Did Donkin write Stay With God? Yeah.
No, Donkin wrote The Wayfarers. Stay With God was by Francis Babazan.
But I think some of Babazan showed up at my dad's, at the door.
Wow.
And my dad said, you come from the same place where, Baba comes from. So and my dad didn't take any fees for his services because of his upbringing. His father had taught him that if there was anybody who was a school teacher, a minister, a priest, or a cleric, they get treated for nothing. So this is a different type of mindset at that time. And these are doctors who were brought up in India. They're very conscientious. And maybe that's why Baba and my dad got close to each other.
So now, after 2 years pass,
so there was some interaction with other members of Baba's close. They used to come to Bombay for some kind of problems. They may have pain here or there, and my dad would treat them for free. And they would go back. So Baba must have known about my dad's condition. When Nariman lived in Bombay, the one who found my dad to come there. So telegram came from Adi Irani, don't worry, my nazar, meaning my inner sight, is on you. And then later, my dad started getting restless. He was seeking for something, I guess. So that's when he started going
to see Baba.
To Mirazad. Well, the first couple of times he went on his own, like a pilgrimage, to check him out. So now...
And so in 65, it describes here
65?
That Dr. Ginde had gone to America to study.
It says Dr. Ginde had gone to America the end of February in 65 to attend a neurology medical convention. He used to go once a year to all these conventions.
So he was constantly trying to learn.
Well, what they did there was they would read papers, findings that they would find when they worked on patients. Maybe somebody in India had a different technique than the one, let's say, in South America or in Europe. And this way, these were medical conferences where my dad would read papers about what he discovered in his, doctors generally discover different techniques. And they share the knowledge. And right now we do that with the internet. Doctor may be operating on someone, he can look up on the internet and see and get advice from another doctor in another part of the country or around the world. So,
it seems like at this time, Baba was suffering from a lot of persistent pain. And
don't forget, Baba was involved in 2 accidents.
Right, 2 accidents.
One in 1952 and one in 1957. So there were a lot of pain that had not left Baba. I'm talking about on his human body. It was frail. So he had gone to a medical convention, neurology medical convention, but even so far away, he would send letters and cables offering advice about Meher Baba's persistent pain. He returned to India after a few weeks, and on March 27th came to Meher Azad for 2 days to examine Baba. This is for a whole different reason now.
Yeah, and then on this paragraph on this bottom of the page here, it describes what your doctor found out, what your father found out.
So on April 3rd, Baba's blood count was taken by Dr. Grant. He was another doctor from Pune, I think a Western doctor. 3 days later, on April 6th, a blood sugar test was done. Along with the neck pain, Baba was suffering headaches. At the time, there was a new discovery, an oil called DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. It was new in America, a new but controversial anti-inflammatory drug, which when applied deadened the nerve endings and relieved pain. This was before the shot. Ginde had tried it on several patients and found it very effective. Dr. Ginde came to Guru Prasad. This was a place in Pune where Baba stayed in the summertime. It was actually a palace that was given to Baba for his stay. On April 14th, and informed Baba about the DMSO oil. For the first time, Baba willingly agreed to try a new type of treatment. Willingly. Ginde twice painted the back of Baba's neck and a small area of the shoulder with some of the oil. That evening, Baba's back and neck where Ginde had applied the oil started turning red and became inflamed. Baba felt a burning sensation and large blisters formed as if the whole area had been burnt. Whoa. It looked terrible. Goher, this is Dr. Goher, she was one of Baba's inner circle, a doctor, was so frightened she was at her wit's end as to what to do. And Ginde had already departed to Bombay. She applied a soothing ointment and some banana tree leaves, which are often used for cooling skin inflammation. Baba lay down but could not sleep. He stayed on his side the entire night because his whole back felt burnt. He could also not sit comfortably in a chair because if he leaned back, the affected part would touch the back of the chair and irritate him.
We just have a couple of minutes left. I would suggest that in the next paragraph you go to the following line. This is one more example. Right here, this is one more example. of how Baba knowingly took physical suffering on.
Meaning?
It took 2 to 3 weeks for the blisters to heal completely. I'll just say it.
Yeah.
And the DMSO had helped to reduce the neck pain by 25%, but at the end of the month, the pain returned to its full intensity. It was noted that just prior to this incident, on April 9th, 1965, fighting broke out between Indian and Pakistani troops in the Rann of Kutch, and then Dr. Ginde
Dr. Ginde came almost every weekend to see Baba at Guru Prasad. During one visit, he described to Baba how he had operated on a child pronounced dead and brought her back to life. And he believed he did this by repeating Baba's name. It says the boy had fallen from a tall building in Bombay and had suffered a severe skull fracture and appeared lifeless. But inwardly inspired, Ginde attempted to save the boy's life and spent 8 hours performing brain surgery on him, every second thinking of Baba and taking his name. Ginde believed that his labors were rewarded when the child regained consciousness, and thus the power and glory of Mir Baba's name was once again proven to a faithful devotee.
Wow, that's a good way to conclude.
I know the boy.
You know the boy. You met the boy.
He used to come to my house.
Amazing story.
And that is a miracle in itself. Baba says, I don't do any miracles. That's an amazing story in itself.
It is. So we're concluding this week's program. We'll bring up part 2 next week, and we'll see you next time. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. I hope you all enjoyed that. Fred, you did a wonderful job with that.
Yeah.
You're such a treasure. You've preserved so much for all of us who didn't have a chance to see things like that.
Yeah, it was
So well
wonderful.
done. Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna paste in the chat window. Remember I told you there's a chat window at the bottom of the screen. I'm gonna paste a link to part 2 of that in case anybody wants to watch that. It's also half an hour. But I think, does anybody have it? We have a few more minutes. Does anybody have anything else they want to share? Or Fred, do you want to wrap up a little bit?
Yeah, well, the thing is with Suhas, he grew on me in my life. He's a contemporary thinking man with this mystical type of background and aura. And it was just great to be with him. It was refreshing. And without him in my life, who knows, probably maybe would have taken some decisions that I made in my life because of the Suhas's influence. And we would talk about sports, about music, about politics, about metaphysics, and also sharing good Indian food together. And so,
did you ever go to a Lakers game with him?
You know, we never did. No, I wasn't with the Lakers at the time. I worked 18 years with the Lakers from 1980 to 1998. And when I met Suhas, I still was with the Lakers, but never pulled that off with him. But it was just wonderful times. And he was so available for do these programs. And he was a great telemarketer. You can imagine how well he is talking on the phone. When he got on the phone with his business associates, you know, throughout the USA, he would call everywhere. He would drop ship toner, printing ink, the cartridges and paper and everything else. And he had a connection with a distributor. And he would relate to me, oh, I made this great $200 sale this week. I get a commission of $200. And he'd be so happy. And I would say, Suhas, you're the perfect guy, because he was so precise when he called people and articulate, and a special guy. Baba, well, he's free now, and I'm so happy for him.
Thank you, Fred. So unless anybody has anything they want to add, you can just pop in and say it. But why don't we end with the beloved prayer? How's that? Okay, go ahead and unmute yourselves so we can say it together. Beloved God, help us all more and
Love
more
you more and more
and more and more.
and more.
And still yet
Still
more.
yet more.
Till we become worthy of
Worthy
union.
of union with you.
And help us
And
all
help us all.
fast
Baba's
Baba's Daman
Baba's
Daman.
to
Daman,
the very end.
till the very end.
Avatar
Mihir
Baba
Baba Ki Jai.
Jai.
Avatar
Avatar Mihir Baba
Baba
Ki
Jai.
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 Avatar
Mihir
Baba
Baba
Ki
Ki
Jai.
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 Thank you, Fred. Thank you, all of you, for being
Thank
here.
you, Cassandra. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred and
Wonderful.
Thank
Cassandra.
you, Angela,
Show.
And
This is
Rosalie, and
Baba.
Sam,
Jai
and
Baba.
David.
Yeah.
Oh, great, and Mahu. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, David and Mahu, thank you for participating. And Rosalie, thank you all.
Thank you.
And Betty, thank
Sam's
you.
gone.